thanks everyone for joining us today for BGSS webinar as part of Leeds Digital Festival, being more efficient in a post-COVID world. We are recording today's session and we do want you to ask as many questions as you feel you want to using the Q&A functionality. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Lee to host today's session.
Hi everyone. Yeah, so I think this is going to be quite an interesting session. We're not really planning too much. We've got a few talking points to speak around, but yeah, the Q&A is probably one of the most valuable bits. So the point of the session is to talk about how to become more efficient when we have to tighten our belts after COVID, and really force that digital transformation through and accelerate it in ways that we've kind of not done before. In my opinion, we were kind of already slightly on that path to accelerating digital transformation. This has just kind of pushed it a little bit further into people's roadmaps, and it seems to be led by engineers and domain experts, and the kind of people that you wouldn't really expect to be leading, that are now gaining sort of more seats at the table in boards and leadership positions. So before I kick off on the first topic, I probably should introduce myself and the rest of the panel. Hopefully there is another joining us, otherwise we're just going to have to make do the three of us. But yeah, so Lauren, do you want to kick off?
Yeah, sure. Hi everyone. So my name is Lauren Bevan and I lead the BGSS Health and Social Care practice. Given that we're talking today about efficiency in a post-COVID world, I should also say that I am also a chartered accountant for my sins and used to work in the NHS as a Deputy Director of Finance. So know a little bit about money in the NHS and in public sector more generally, and actually the challenges that the public sector will be facing off the back of COVID, because I'm fully aware that the money that's been used to prime the COVID response is needed at the moment, but there will be, as always, there's no such thing as a free lunch, and looking to discuss actually how the NHS can use the technology gains that it's had in the last 6 months to be able to be more efficient when it's expected to do so over the coming years in the next comprehensive spending review period. And over to Simon.
Thanks, Lauren. Hello everyone, my name is Simon Beale. I had the intelligent automation practice here at BGSS. I think it's going to be an interesting conversation today, especially around that intelligent automation space. I think there's the pieces within the actual application and the implementation, but also with the business benefits it brings. So looking forward to having lots of great Q&A on that topic. Good to you, Tim.
Tim Walpole. I'm a creative technologist for Spark. Do a lot of work around innovation, experimentation. Been doing a lot of work for Lauren around healthcare and understanding how we can rapidly help the NHS with some of the conversations there. And interested in everything to do with this new world we're in.
Great, thanks everyone. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was the acceleration of cloud-based functions and business functions and some of our experiences around that. So I think that one of the biggest case studies that we have as an organisation is in the RPA space, when COVID first hit, and we had to quickly respond with some tactical solutions to deal with things like rebooking of appointments. Not in the NHS, this is in a different organisation, this one, but being able to sort of deploy something that accelerated rebooking of appointments, 40,000 of them, in fact, in 3 weeks to design the system and actually get it rolled out, something that could have taken 3 months. And now that sort of basis and that baseline is in existence, so we can build upon it to then do future and further digital transformations. So I guess this is probably a good one for you to kick off with, Simon, because there's a lot to talk about in this space when it comes to RPA and intelligent automation.
Yeah, no, thanks, Lee. Yeah, they're just building on the piece that I was just introducing myself on, but looking at that example that Lee was talking about. So that touches both the areas of efficiency gains. So firstly, what we're talking about there is implementing a robotic process automation tool. Now that tooling itself, the way it's built, is in a low-code environment. So it's got a GUI setup. So it means that it's very quick and efficient to set up. You do need experienced people because there's levels creativity and different ways of doing it. But it's a lot quicker than traditional approaches to get to that business benefit. And that business benefit itself is the other part, is we're automating processes here. And the objective is either to free up someone's time from something that's repetitive, a little bit boring maybe, but also to do stuff quicker. I mean, these robots, they can work in an unattended fashion. That's in the background 24/7. So you've got huge capacity gain there as well. So going back to that example that Lee talked about, that was 3 months worth of work it would have taken the team for something they never knew they were going to have to do. And it was done by these robots in 10 days. But the setup of those robots themselves was a matter of days, a handful of days as well. So you've got both sides of the equation there, the setup and the execution, delivering huge efficiency gains. I don't know if it's post-COVID world, I think it's in COVID world as well, that we can see those benefits at the moment. I think we can talk maybe later about some of the processes improvement and the pipeline, but I'd quite be interested in hearing from Lauren about how we might apply that into the healthcare segment. I think we were talking about waiting lists, weren't we, and other areas. Over to you.
Yeah, so I mean, most people will be aware that there's been a huge strain on, I guess, non-emergency and non-COVID functions in the NHS at the moment, and there's been quite a lot of press today around what that means for people waiting for cancer referrals. So there's normally about a million people waiting in the UK for treatment. So be that an operation they know that need to have, or waiting for an outpatient appointment in a hospital, that's looking to tip up to about 10 million by the end of the year. And that's without the impact or forecasting a second wave and any sort of reduction in capacity that might sort of take out of the system. So we're talking again like a really high volume, and actually it's unpredictable in terms of how long slots might be taken down for, how long clinics might be out for, and actually how people get rebooked into that. And that's causing people quite a lot of stress at the moment, understandably, both from a health systems perspective around how you protect people's health needs, but also from an operational perspective around how you're able to take down capacity and then spring it back up at the point you can do it. So either by turning clinics virtually rather than face-to-face, or by actually moving that capacity elsewhere to a site which might be a non-COVID site, which is, if you've got a couple of hospital sites, that's what people are doing from a management perspective. But at the moment, you typically tend to get about sort of 20 to 30% of cancer patients are actually diagnosed through a cancer referral. So they're on a 2-week sort of fast track. Probably about the same amount are routine, and those routine appointments are the ones that are not getting to the front of the queue. And the remainder are people who present in A&E with quite severe symptoms and a quite late stage diagnosis. And understandably, the prognosis for those people aren't great. So people are worried at the moment around how you can use things to make the system more efficient, to be able to give those people access that doesn't rely on really heavy manual processes, ringing people up and asking for their availability, and also using postal services to be able to get people, letters out to them. So there's a huge thing for the NHS to be able to get to grips with, sort of large scale transformational change. And this has been spoken about since it's in the long-term plan in 2016. How can the sector use this as a way of actually fulfilling some of the ambitions that have been set out in policy a number of years ago, and using things like RPA and intelligent automation to be able to allow people to book into slots which suit their needs, work around their lifestyles, and also give a bit more flexibility to operational managers who are struggling with a huge amount of things at the moment in terms of second wave and trying to deal with these sort of presenting issues around COVID backlogs.
I like something that Simon said actually about low-code environments. So obviously RPA is generally a low-code environment. It's very sort of tool and product specific. And my initial reaction to start adopting some of these tools was that engineers were going to think, oh no, I'm above that. That's not what I do. But actually, it's not the case at all. In fact, that fast delivery, and we're fortunate enough to have a great graduate academy at BJSS, and I was fortunately involved in it yesterday, running the day, which was all around RPA and seeing some of the creative solutions. And I mean, they were creative solutions around performance tuning and being able to rebook efficiently and quickly. I think they probably did a better job than I could, in all honesty. But yeah, it's that taking something which is appropriate for the problem, and that might be RPA, that might be something else, and delivering that value quickly, securely, and easily. Yeah, I don't know if you've got any views on that, Tim.
Indeed, I was going to pick up a couple of things. I mean, the first one is about releasing the value. Every time we look at some of this, it should be around what is the value I can release to the organisation, and some of that is about what we talked about, being able to do things rapidly. So being able to say, look, actually, I can take a challenge. I can understand the value of being able to do that. Use some really good tooling, whether it's RPA, add in a bit of AI around that. So we're doing some really good tooling, but to be able to say this can release some value as part of that longer term strategy, to say this is where I want to get to in the future. And I think it's really important to look at that. It's not just about, look, we'll do this today and then leave it there. It's about, we'll take you on that journey to be able to release that value to the organization in little steps.
Simon, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, no, there's definitely about that value piece. Just before that, I just come back to the bit you were talking about, the graduates. I stepped into that session and saw that the use case and example you had them working through for the afternoon, and it was fascinating to see all their creativity and the different solutions. All great, all achieved the aim, but did it slightly differently. And that's one of the key pieces I've been trying to talk to everyone about, is that this is, although it's low code and it can be speedy to implement, you need experienced people, which obviously we have here at BGSS, because this is not something you just pick up and do the next day. You want to know the best way of doing it and the different options so that your clients know what could be achieved and actually what the implications are of making those certain decisions. And I think that was a great example. We had a set of really bright people working on the same problem, but showing different, albeit great ways of achieving that. So no, that was very interesting. Now, to come back to the value point that Tim was talking about, that's 100% what it's all about. You don't want to get out of bed really and not create some sort of value at the end of the day. And in our space here, we often think about that value in terms of hours saved. And that's in its simplistic terms. And what do we do with the hours saved? Well, if we are at the nuts and bolts level RPA, taking out repetitive processes, we're letting your really experienced, talented employees that are really stretched, no doubt, do some value-add activities. Now, that could be in frontline support, in places like the contact centres that are getting inundated. But let's not forget more generic processes that all organisations have. So finance, human resources, procurement, all areas that get snowed to a certain extent, come under cost pressures, and are also you can automate very successfully and very quickly with lots of good use cases of what you can do around, say, invoice automation, processing different types of channel, different types of formats very quickly. You can do the same with your processes for recruiting people, offboarding, onboarding people, the same piece with your procurement process as well, where you want to take someone through a catalogue that can get automated very quickly. Some things we've explored is potentially putting RPA into the next level, which we look as intelligent automation, where we bring a slice of artificial intelligence and machine learning in. There's tools that we use that have that built in already. We're partnering on the market leading tools here, which is Uipath. Not solely, we look at other tools, including open source tooling like Robocall. But if we look at that Uipath, it's got that longer functionality that's starting to embed some intelligent automation tooling in the OCR space, in AI, in document understanding. But also in-house, we've developed our own open source AI conversational chatbot, which leads me to thinking where we focus here, attention is often in that front end, is where we get the real pure investment, the real value add. And then we try and use more of the industry standard tooling in the back end to deliver a scalable solution, but that can be upgraded and maintained at lowest cost possible. And that's a really interesting use case. So with the AI chatbot piece, we've been looking at conversational movement, so you can help people in their journey. It could be someone sitting in the waiting list queue, or in some other sort of way, and just communicating and keeping them in a more positive mindset as they're trying to book something or find something out. that's kind of where I'd like to try and explore more further. I don't know, Tim, if you're obviously very close to that AI conversational piece, if you'd like to add something to that as well.
I think there's some really good points there. And yes, I think it's, you brought up a point right at the beginning. We have some really good skills within the organization around absolutely everything. But it's, and from what we did the other day, you understand that everyone does different things and comes up with different solutions. Being able to use some of this tooling up front to be able to actually almost experiment, understand the art of the possible, really quickly using that tool chain to come up with the most probable solution, or the one that's going to release the most value using the least effort, is really important. And being able to join those tools together. So by using some of the stuff we've already done with artificial intelligence, natural language processing, whatever it may be, being able to join that into the RPA toolchain becomes really important and really exciting. Lauren mentioned that we'd done some work around waiting lists and things. So as an example of some of the stuff we've done, Lauren gave me a challenge to say, look, there's some data out there that basically says, hospitals see this number of people for elective care, so for elective care appointments. This is the number of people that are being sent by their GPs. And due to COVID, that's all got a bit pear-shaped because we're not seeing anyone. But as we come out of COVID, we're going to be able to see people again. So if you can use artificial intelligence to be able to say, actually, I can look at the data I've already got, and I can try and do some forecasting about how many people that are going to be seen in the future. And as we go in and out of phase 2 and phase 3 or whatever it's going to be, that's going to change. But then if you can provide a single platform that people can go to and find that information rather than flood through to each of the admissions teams to say, when am I going to be seen? You take some pressure off the NHS using those amazing tools. If you then link that up at the back end to be able to say, actually, I can send all these appointment letters out automatically, and I can conversationally have that conversation with the people about, yes, you're going to be seen here, but do you know you need to go in social distance? Join all that together, you've got a really good platform. And it goes with all the skills that we have, because we have those type of people that can look at that and say, how on earth would I do something that I don't know what I've got to do yet, using the skills that we've got within BJSS. I think that makes sense.
It does.
Lauren, I've kind of got a question for you. I just want to frame it slightly differently. So you said data there, there's lots of data. So I heard this quote that if data is the new oil, then algorithms are the new refineries. And I really like that. But then I kind of wanted to add a little bit more to it, which is don't reinvent the wheel, use that refined oil to make that wheel better or work better. So when it comes to off-the-shelf products, and this is where I'm going with this, Lauren, that not one product fits all. It is good to kind of use something that already exists that's fit for purpose, but there are some challenges and some risks there as well, right?
Yeah, and I think it's about flexibility. So as we're all in an ever-changing situation with this, and with, Tim sort of referenced phase 2, phase 3, phase whatever, everything that we do has to be flexible to be able to accommodate what's coming next. And I think there's something about having a sort of low-code platform like this allows you to be fungible and flexible. It doesn't require a load of sort of code base rework to be able to change things. And also we're kind of experimenting to see what works. So what works in terms of a conversational dialogue with me around an outpatient appointment wouldn't necessarily work with my dad, for example, or different communities. And every NHS organisation represents a different sort of spread and blend of communities. So they also need something which will help them to be able to have engagement with their communities in the way that they see fit. And they know their populations better than anybody. So having something that's like an 80% solution that allows you to get the job done, which then allows you to spend your time and effort refining that and making it the best and most efficient use for you and bespoking it.
So I want to step out of RPA and chatbots and things for a bit, because obviously there are other ways of being efficient. I'm a massive open source advocate, for example. So when I was talking about reinventing the wheel, if somebody's already got something or you're collaborating on something, then why not use that? In a sort of past life, I did a lot of work in China and Taiwan, and they would have organizations where you would just work in that one organization for your entire life. You know, you'd be headhunted from university, you'd sit in your silos, there wasn't really meetup events, and you'd see coding practices and standards which were, you know, decades old. And, you know, if we look at some of that now, we kind of think, what's going on? Whereas in, you know, in the UK especially, we're very collaborative. We're happy to share some of the things that we're doing. And that doesn't mean that, you know, organizations can't innovate and do some exciting things and differentiate, but some of those basics and, you know, blueprints and best practice is actually a really good way to share and, you know, secure systems. So one of the things that we have at BJSS, for example, is our landing zone. So if you want to have a brand new environment with years of experience as code backing it and best practice and, you know, tried and tested, one thing that you can do is set up that environment, and then you've got a lot of guardrails and I've got a lot of best practices kind of out of the box, and sharing that and using that knowledge as part of a sort of wider community, I think is really important to driving that quick, fast efficiency that's secure. So you're not just rushing something out and then having to worry about it that's not been tested. You know, using tried and tested things by multiple organizations. So the next question is kind of around yeah, those accelerators. There's, you know, headless seems to be making a huge comeback, and other bits and pieces. I don't know, Tim, if you've got any experiences or any projects that have kind of taken on that that kind of tech at the minute.
I think, as you say, there's new tools coming out, and we need to start playing with these because that's where the industry is going. But also it allows us the ability, as you say, to create a good set of patterns and tooling that we can reuse. It's one thing, it's always a challenge as a consultancy to go and redo everything, and we will do everything bespoke. And the challenge around that is you redo, and the cost of doing that is enormous. So we need to start getting clever and use standard technologies. And as you say, headless or Jamstack stuff is really getting good press at the moment. I actually run my other half's fashion site using headless technologies and Gatsby and static sites. And it is incredible what you can do with those. It has its challenges. And of course, if someone says, look, I can just do headless and everything. But the challenge is you still need to think about the security of the site and all those things wrapping around it. But being able to get something up running rapidly, to be able to show the art of the possible and the value to someone, and then you wrap the layers of security around it. Potentially, look, I want to be able to do some headless stuff. I want to do Gatsby with static websites, contentful for my content, and then wrap it into AWS with CloudFront security, WAF and things. We have all those skills internally, and we should be reusing that. So look, I did this before. There is a standard template that allows me to do it again and again and again and reuse. And I think that's one of our challenges. How do we document that and make it available to everyone?
And iterate on it as well. You know, it's not really just a case of, right, here's all the best practices you'll ever need. And you're quite right, as a consultancy, you know, often we do go in and we kind of build something from the ground up that's specific to the customer's requirements every time. I think those days are kind of changing. And we're now looking at a lot more due diligence around off-the-shelf products and looking to see, is this fit for purpose? What is the non-functional requirements that are wrapped around it? If we're using a headless e-commerce system, you know, can it scale to the customer needs? Can we import their million products that they've got from their database, and looking at it from that way, and then joining these things together? I think you touched on that earlier, Tim, actually, which was making sure that all of these things are joined up. And yeah, that could be partially through RPA, it could be through, you know, just integrations and engineering, but I think that ultimately, yeah, tying together all of these products, and often managed products as well. You mentioned some AWS services there, which were, you know, they're managed off-the-shelf kind of products that you stringing together that have got, you know, the rigor and things around them. So I don't know if anyone else has got any sort of comments on the sort of landing zones, the blueprints, and sort of accelerators like that.
Two things that I'd add to it. One is about open standards as well as open source. So I think if you can't necessarily have open source products which fit it, at least having open standards to be able to have something which is a standard patterning that you can push against. And that's obviously interop is a huge challenge in the NHS. And I think that's only going to become overcome with open standards, because it won't be on open source products. And I think the final thing is around those design patterns. So there's the service manual and other things that exist around how people engage with services, so that people have a similar expectation because they work through their interaction with the technology in a fairly standard way, and that creates a standard expectation around how people have dialogue with the technology. And I think both of those things sort of supplement everything that's just been discussed, really.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'd add to that. I mean, well, longer term, we'd see that happening in the RPA space as well. I mean, historically, pre-RPA world, big fan of open source components. Even not even just application, the back end things like MySQL, great databases and quite useful, and still got personal use today. But as we see the maturing in the intelligent automation sector, there's already a couple of interesting organizations out there. I mentioned one earlier that's looking at open source components. So quite often I'm talking to them at the moment about potential doing some work together. And I think that's, as we're part of the community and we're about collaboration, the RPA community is very open and lives in that way at a global level already. And then we're at technology level, we can see there's starting to be that type of offerings available. So yeah, no, definitely something I expect to see more of in the future.
Something just popped into my head then as well. So, I mean, you mentioned Uipath, which is one of our partners earlier in the RPA space. I mean, they have a component library, and I think about 80% of their components are free to use as well. So they are kind of saying, right, okay, even if somebody's done something really similar, there's probably a component in there that you can use or fork or accelerate.
Well, that's about that invoice piece. I mean, it's back to what Laura was saying about, in finance. I think that a lot of those components are available in a library to straight away use and make use of. And in fact, internally at BGSS, we're starting to set up our own libraries as well and store stuff there for reuse. So we've also got our own piece. I guess we should probably think about sharing that back into the community as well.
Yeah, absolutely. There's one final point that I kind of wanted to make before we start taking some questions. So please try and get them in. Is being more efficient can also include reaching out to more people, more sales channels, more basically more visibility through little effort. So one of the things that we were looking at recently was for a clothing store that didn't really have much of an online presence, but to kind of get up and running with an online presence is quite a lot of effort. So we looked at Instagram as a sales channel and how we could very, very quickly spin up something that allowed us to be able to enable a brand new channel without much effort. That's a huge market, and where everybody sat at home on the phones, generally scrolling down. So it's not just about enabling something which is easy, it's about enabling something which is in use. And if you look at the sort of Chinese market, that's the way that this is going. It's all, adverts for clothing and things within your social media. And that could be TikTok, it could be Instagram, it could be various other pieces. And that trend is kind of taking on here now, but I think that China's probably slightly ahead. So I guess it's not just about coding efficiency, it's not just about business efficiency, it's about being able to extend your reach as well easily, and sort of adding that value to Tim's point earlier. But before we take any questions, anyone got anything that they want to add?
No, I think Simon's hit on a good point about storing things that we've done. And I think that's something that's really important. So we're good at storing stuff in Confluence and things, but let's start taking, these are snippets of RPA code, or here's a snippet for being able to how to spin this up or do this. Even if it's his snippets for how to use serverless and things like that, if we're going to get reuse, we need to start putting that together. So we've all got some really, and I think there's some challenges as you come on and off projects, being able to say, look, I'm going to take the experience I've got and make it available to everyone else. But it's really important in this world now where we need to be not only competitive, but actually doing the right stuff as well. So yeah, let's start doing that.
I mean, there's definitely a move to that component reuse when we're talking even about UIs and micro UIs and microservices. You know, that's a huge area at the moment where everyone's saying, well, we don't want to reinvent the wheel, even in our own organization across multiple different sites and services. So, I mean, especially in the sort of public sector where we've got the GDS framework that already exists, and can we kind of leverage that and then build our micro UI frameworks on top of it? How can we do that in a steady way? How can we do that and get all of the teams bought into it? So, so one of the challenges around with that is if you build it up too quickly, you end up kind of having this very strange scenario where some things start taking on a slightly different life to other ones, and other teams aren't quite sure what they're doing. You kind of need to put down those key principles of how you're sharing, what the responsibilities are, what's in your vertical for your team. So in the case of micro UIs, you probably don't want styling to be kind of across all of them. You kind of want to look at different ways of being able to do that and building up that maturity. So yeah, I mean, internally at BGSS, we have that same kind of problem because we have lots of components and pieces of code that we're developing, which some isn't owned by our customers and some is, you know, our IP. How do we open source that? How do we reuse that? How do we make it discoverable? Make sure that people are aware that we have that thing as well.
Agreed.
So we've got a question. Oh, Karen's pops up.
Here.
Hello.
So we've seen in the past systems like SAP being chosen as something off the shelf that works, but then consumes a huge amount of resource to configure and maintain. How do we avoid this sort of nearly right reuse becoming as painful as SAP?
I would really like to take this one. So that example, I wouldn't see that as, you know, a kind of off-the-shelf product that you kind of look at for a purpose. That's what when I'm talking about off-the-shelf products, I'm talking about things that have been designed for a specific purpose and figuring out whether that fits your use case or not. The kind of one-size-fits-all is not necessarily the right thing to do because they take so much configuration time, there's huge licensing costs, and I think that those kind of days are done now of, you know, the big installs of one size fits all platforms and, you know, configuring this bit here and then never being able to upgrade it and then being stuck with it and then having to use it for something else because you're paying that license cost. I think those days are done. It's more about the sort of micro components and products that you can use and put together and not really have to configure and modify. It's more about connecting them together.
Cool. We've had another one come in. How do you measure success? Any of you?
I'll take it from a finance perspective to give everyone else some thinking and pondering time about how they would measure success. So I think from a health perspective, then I think there's success around sort of citizen value. So I think there's something about empowering citizens to get advice and guidance and actually understand, you know, where they are and how to manage their own health. I think there was obviously the National Audit Office sort of stuff around efficacy and efficiency, which is around just making sure that taxpayers' money goes as far as it possibly can, and making sure that that pound value is best spent, because every pound that's spent on technology in the NHS is a pound that's not spent on drugs or nurses and other things. So it's about making sure that that is as efficient as possible. And I think there is something about success being doing what you said you're going to do when you say you're going to do it. So I think there's something about managing your clients' expectations about what it is that you're going to deliver for them, and that people are getting what sort of a no surprises culture around those things. Those are all things that I think would define what I would articulate as being successful.
So I guess that's for the public sector, and yeah, with everything being very user centric, it's all about the user and delivering value to them and or the sort of recipient of the outputs of that technology. In the private sector, for me, success is not actually anything to do with profit. It's actually about making sure that you've delivered the right solution, you know, in the right time frame, and looked at what is available to do that. So I would set myself a challenge at the start of every project to kind of say, is there another way of doing this? Are we doing this the best way? And kick the tires on it and poke it, and, you know, actually question the team a lot and say things like, are you sure that's the right way of doing it? Are you happy with what you're doing? Is there anything that you're worried about? Do you think we should change this in this way? And just asking all of those questions and evolving that thing means that by having that sort of conversation, you end up with a really good solution at the end of it.
I think that the part about kicking the tires is really important. Quite often you're given a challenge at the beginning that says, just come and do this for us, where they don't really know what this is. They don't really understand what the value is, and therefore what are the success metrics. And it may be you come in on the first thought and say, I'm going to do this, and actually it might achieve the outcome, but it's going to cost you £1 million, so it's potentially not available. So how do you kick those tires? But it's understanding what success does mean and what the value is. So you've got to deliver success, but you've got to understand what that success metric is. It could be as simple, it's culture change. It could be increased revenue, decreased costs, whatever those things are. But look at those up front, kick the tires a bit until you have the best possible solution that will deliver the value and a set of metrics that says, yes, I did deliver it, and this is how we've measured that.
So I think the second message here is kick the tires on your data oiled wheels.
I guess, Simon, have you got anything to finish off on that one?
Yeah, on success, I mean, clearly there's the macro way of looking at it. So, yeah, is that hours saved in the RPA IA world, or is the employee happier now in their working day because some of the repetitive processes are removed and freed up time? Are they working normal hours now because they were having to be stretched exceptional hours or even doing weekends? But getting down to that actual KPI level that Tim's talking about, the micro level, I think is where you need to get just to measure success. So, I mean, we were talking to someone about categorizing cases the other day. They come in multiple different variables. So we define a set of KPIs around, improved speed of response to customers, improved percentage of first-time categorization, improved accuracy in reporting, improved accuracy in billing to certain percentages. So that's what we'd want to do, is at the macro level know what the big ticket measures are, but drill down to have some KPIs that we can look at success, and then we either achieve that outcome, or we achieve something better maybe, or we don't achieve it, and then we can learn from it, understand why we didn't achieve it. Was it the wrong measure, or could we done something better in that journey towards it? So yeah, that's a really good question, and quite interesting answers.
Well, I think we're just coming up to the end of time. Is there anything that you want to add, anybody? Lee?
I think I peaked on my data wheels and kicking the tires. I mean, it's not quite as good as the sandwich shop from last time. But...
No, it's not. You have to get that in, didn't you? No, thank you so much for joining us today. Like I said, we did record it, so we will be following up afterwards. I hope you enjoy the rest of the festival, and we'll see you all soon.